Before I launch into this, I feel better that I have fewer slides. But I still have a lot, so I'm going to go fast. There's a QR code in the bottom left. I've published the links on my social media. There'll be a QR code at the end. That will take you to a folder online that has a PDF of everything, and it also includes a folder that has individual images of each slide. So if you try to take pictures of the slides as they go by, you're likely to get frustrated, and I wouldn't want to frustrate you. So, defining sustainability in an era of suboptimal metabolic health. That's a kind phrase, suboptimal, isn't it? So let's start with some disclosures. I have none by my understanding, but to introduce myself, I consider myself a facilitator and an educator regarding therapeutic carbohydrate reduction and ruminant animal agriculture. If you don't know what that last is, we can talk. I've worked in forage agriculture for most of my adult life. If you don't know what that is, we can talk. I'm now fully retired and self-funded, and I consider myself an omnivore, although I'm heavy on animal-sourced foods. So you know who's talking to you. Oh, by the way, I've been given a new title. Only 15. So, yeah, okay, let's move along. Humanity's past is rooted in the savannah. Firmly believe this. I believe it should inform our consideration of lots of aspects. And I believe, and I can justify, that humanity's future will be rooted in our grasslands. Our grasslands are our most endangered biomes, far more than tropical forests. Most of them, a substantial portion of them have been converted to agricultural use. And when we do that, we lose all sorts of ecosystem services. And these frequently aren't considered in the conversations about sustainability. So from others, I've gotten good ideas. Frankly, most of my good ideas came from someone else. So these three essential keys guide my thinking and activity. Number one, animal-sourced foods are key to public health. Or you could say that public health will be harmed by further reductions in animal-sourced food consumption due to any reason. Lots of reasons that could happen, but they won't produce benefit. Animal-sourced foods are key to sustainable food systems. There can be no sustainable food system without livestock in general, and ruminants in particular, and we'll go into that. And these foods are part of our cultures and traditions regardless of where those come from. The idea of a truly vegan, truly animal-sourced, food-free diet is really a recent construct, largely out of the wealthy North. It's a belief system, it's a worldview, it's a narrative, it's cultural imperialism. So let's consider some essential goals. I think all people of goodwill ought to be able to agree on these. If we find ourselves in conversations where we're not agreeing on these, I think we're having a different conversation, but you know how you talk about things that aren't really what you're talking about? I think that's the case. So we all should be, and I got these from Adele Height. Thank you. Yeah, she's an inflection point in my life, another story, no time. We ought to be able to agree that one of our goals should be providing adequate essential nutrition for as many human beings as possible. And we should focus on maintaining metabolic health. Now, I would never deign to edit anything that Adele Height came up with. However, say I've been told that but means BS to everything you just said. So, however, I want to point out that there's a difference between adequate and optimal. Now, we're still arguing about what's adequate. And we really haven't come to grips yet with what's optimal. But, okay, and then given, as I will show, that we're in the grip of a pandemic of metabolic illness globally across all income level countries, Maybe we should also focus on restoring metabolic health. And maybe the diet that someone could arguably stay healthy on is different once you become metabolically ill, and now you need a therapeutic diet. And then once you're restored to metabolic health, can you go back to that healthy diet? Question. But again, I'm not that kind of doctor. Didn't stay at the Holiday Inn Express last night. For those from America, you get that. And I'm not a human nutritionist, so I'm speculating. So I'm now certain that I'm going to be the first speaker here to quote Dean Ornish. But the point I want to make here is that we need to sometimes dig deeper than just the words that are used. So 2 quotes of Dean Ornish I'd like to cite. What's good for your heart is good for your brain. Anybody here agree with that? Yeah, put your hands together. Thank you. I suspect we're going to differ on the detail. Okay, let's try another one. What's good for you is good for our planet. I absolutely believe this. I know for certain that I differ on the details. And so we need to be really careful across this space, understanding what people mean when they use words that we think we know what they mean. Okay. Now, I don't have to spend a lot of time convincing this group about how rotten this structure is. Okay? New wallpaper or a new coat of paint ain't going to fix this. Calling it something else isn't sufficient. We got to get in and at least tear out the rotten foundation and rebuild a solid foundation. We may even need to call in the local fire department so they can have a practice burn day and just start over. So we're familiar with how rotten those foundation of dietary advice is. But we should also be familiar with how that foundation underlies health messaging and conversations about food systems and sustainability and policy visions and research priorities. And so I urge you to continue doing the work in your space because that comes back and can free us to do work in my spaces and the spaces of my colleagues. So the outline, give you an introduction of who I am. I'm going to talk about malnutrition. I'm going to talk about ruminants. In the second hour of my presentation, I'll talk about sustainability. I'll talk about my vision that I wish to share with you and enlist you in, and then the closing. So here we go, introduction. When I started my health journey, it was 2007. I was a 51-year-old balding, obese, pre-diabetic. Today I'm just balding. But yeah, it's not a miracle, right? I mean, okay. Maybe one day. So my training in agronomy taught me about those things, the sciences to deal with healthy soils and healthy plants. I have a minor in animal nutrition, specifically in ruminant nutrition. So I understand the fundamental role of proper nutrition in animal health. And then for the last 18 years, I've been reading and learning from people like you. And of course, there's interactions all around this circle. And in 2010, I started speaking publicly. I called it grass-based health. Grass-based health. Words mean things. Had I been better informed, I would be aware that there's a global initiative across many conversation spaces called One Health. But the problem here is what I mentioned with the derelict house. When we get to human health, frequently it comes with the received wisdom of what constitutes a healthy diet. And so that's why we have to get this stuff sorted. I have no idea when this picture was taken. It was taken in Colorado. It's BC, before COVID. You may recognize some of the people in the picture. Okay, so what's a forage agronomist and what are you doing here? That's a fair question. But I've been building bridges. So here's one from July. You may recognize some of these people. So I got to introduce the gentleman that's on my right in this picture to the gentlemen who are on my left in this picture and sit back and watch the conversation take place. These are brilliant people. But they're coming from their own disciplines, and so trying to build these bridges between disciplines. Here's an event that I proposed and produced and organized at the American Society of Animal Sciences. If you look on my Substack, you can find my post that describes all of these presentations on why livestock are essential. And these are top of their field people. Forgive me, I'm going to read this out. Meat does not cause disease. In the past, many erroneous beliefs were held regarding meat as a contributing cause to disease. Meat has been blamed for a long list of diseases such as kidney trouble, rheumatism, high blood pressure, cancer, hardening of the arteries, gout, etc. In the light of the new knowledge of foods and diet through careful scientific investigation, these old theories not only have been discarded, but in many cases meat has a place in the treatment of the very diseases which it was once said to cause. 1933. Almost 100 years ago. Please, if you're coming into this space, welcome. But please learn about the story of how we got from there then to here now. Please learn about the people that have been active, the people on whose shoulders we hope to stand. Sometimes, it's like we're born on third base and we think we hit a triple. If you get the sports analogy, sorry, wrong continent, okay. But a lot of my colleagues don't understand that story. So at that panel at the Animal Science Society, I gave a presentation. It's available on YouTube, as all of them are. Humanity's existential crisis, malnutrition, and chronic illnesses. It's new information to people. It's old information to us. Maybe to put it, we're familiar with this. Many people are not. Grasslands of the world stand twixt a world of plenty and a world of famine, between a land surface of green oases and a land of desert, between surface soil stability and accelerated erosion. 1956, the year I was born. This is not new. We just may be learning about it. And welcome. What can I do to help us learn more about this, as you have helped me learn more about the other end of the bridge that I'm walking back and forth from? So let's continue this thought experiment of the words we use. What does food mean? In many traditional cultures, it means meat. And there's interesting stories about what happens when people go survey various populations and say, how often do you eat meat? And they say, maybe twice a month. And it turns out they think meat means what we have on special holidays. Whereas they're eating meat several times a day, every day. The words we use mean things, and we need to make sure. Okay, and then all of these traditional peoples are, of course, undergoing dietary transitions, and then we see their health decline. By the way, next year, 2026, is the International Year of Rangelands and Pastoralists. So if you're interested in that, let me know. Here's another long quote. I'm sorry. Meat has long been and continues to be a primary source of high-quality nutrition. The theory that it can be replaced with legumes and supplements is mere speculation. While diets high in meat have proved successful over the long history of our species, the benefits of vegetarian diets are far from being established, and its dangers have been largely ignored by those who have endorsed it prematurely on the basis of questionable evidence. I have no trouble with people's personal dietary choices. My concern is when people think they're doing that out of informed decisions, and I strongly suspect that they don't have the information that they think they have. So, primary message to this audience and every audience, to those restoring their mental and physical health, or helping others do that, with a diet containing animal source foods. Would that be anybody in this room? Okay, please don't listen to the voices that sold you the diet that made you sick in the first place. Understand that there is a worldview and narrative behind that that also extends into other areas. So we need to understand who the players are. When each strand of their narrative is tested, it's shown to be weak based on flawed beliefs. Right? We encounter these arguments, and they seem really persuasive, like a really thick hemp rope. But if we can untwist that rope and test each strand, they fail. We are told by certain people who are quick to label others, looking at you, Eat Lancet, that their diet will promote global health and will promote planetary health. And we know from people that we respect that it will not do the former, and I'm here to tell you it cannot do the latter. Other than that. So please understand that when you improve your health, you are improving the world. You have no idea who's watching. Right? The ripples that go out from what we do. And this may be the most practical thing that most of us can do. Not all of us are blessed to be able to come to Cape Town. But we can take what we receive here and take it back home. And I certainly hope that happens. Malnutrition. One can be fed but not nourished. Animal source foods have a particularly important, if not an essential, role in nourishing people. This is the former director of the International Livestock Research Institute, ILRI. And I wish he didn't hedge. But this is the political world, right? But this is a pretty strong statement, and it represents sort of an emerging awareness on their part. But this idea that we can be fed but not nourished, those are not synonyms. You frequently treat them as if they are. Overfed but undernourished is a real thing. Now, proteins come up several times. I gave a major presentation on protein a while ago. This is also available on YouTube. But by the way, when you look on a label or you look in a table of nutrition and it lists protein, it's listing crude protein. And if you don't know the significance of that term, please come see me, ask during questions. Moving right along. Some things have come to my attention since that time, newly emerging, that I would have included and will in an update. So this is one estimate by View and colleagues that said approximately half of total protein intake by adults must be animal-based to meet non-protein nutrient-based requirements. Okay. We talk about protein. The meat industry, I hate that term, but I don't know a better one. The meat industry, because it's poultry, it's swine, it's beef, it's tremendously variable. But they refer to themselves as protein industry. Why? Because they're still scared of fat, I think. This is my speculation. And what I and others are saying is you need to own the fact that you're meat. Right? Get over it. Understand how you got here, but move on. because you're putting yourself on par with soy extract and pea extract and, okay, all right, sorry, but I digest. So, by that standard, only 65 to 75% of humanity is malnourished. 65 to 75% of our global brothers and sisters do not get 50% or more of their dietary protein from animal source foods. Here's another. This is from Gain Report, Nordhagen and colleagues, 2020. The role of animal source foods in healthy, sustainable, and equitable food systems. Rapidly increasing deficiencies in populations consuming less than 30% of calories from animal source foods. And lest you think this is merely a problem in low and low middle income countries, oh, what happened? Oh, a slide. Oh, sorry. So again, 60 to 70% of humanity by that standard are malnourished. Again, 29% of calories in U.S. food supply are coming from animal source foods, so we're below the 30%. The great irony that I see, and irony isn't the right word, but it's the best I can do up here on my feet in front of you, is that we have a situation across the globe where people, out of necessity, involuntarily in the low and middle income countries, are experiencing things that people in the high income countries are experiencing by choice. In the vast majority of the world, it's affordability, it's access, and frankly, food safety in some cases, for reasons I could go into. In other areas, it's because they think it's good for their health or they think it's good for the planet. And here's even later. This just came out this year, a few weeks ago. Rideau and colleagues, they say maybe that target is 60 to 80% of dietary protein coming from animal source foods in order to meet our non-protein nutrient requirements. How might that shift our conversations about food systems? So the words we use, malnutrition, traditionally includes undernutrition and overnutrition. Undernutrition is famine, right? Overnutrition is how they describe obesity. Now, I'm just an agronomist, right? So I think overnutrition reflects calories in, calories out thinking. I have heard people say, look at what a great job our agriculture is doing. Look at all the fat people. And if you believe obesity is the result of overeating and or sedentary behavior, of course you do. Right? We're back to which, camp do you have your foot in? And where are you urinating on? Oh, sorry. Yeah, that probably shouldn't have been said. So if I have a perspective informed by metabolic health and carbohydrate insulin model, maybe we can change the definition. Maybe malnutrition should be considered any diet that evokes a metabolic derangement due to any reason. Avoid the diet wars. How's that working for you? Right? Okay. If we do that, we realize we're being inundated by this tsunami of malnutrition. True, if we look at non-insulin resistant hyperinsulinemia, malnutrition, we're looking at 2 to 3 million deaths a year. It's a shame. That's a scandal. We can and must do better. This has got nothing to do with food production. It's got to do with food distribution. Okay? But if we look at those deaths due to insulin resistance and hyperinsulinemia, it's 10 times more. This is not news to you, it's news to a lot of audiences. Death is inevitable, but a life of protracted ill health is not. Chronic disease prevention and control helps people to live longer and healthier lives. Amen. I agree with the WHO. What about remission? Now, to be fair, this report came out in 2005. But still, are they aware of type 2 diabetes remission? To say nothing of the great good news about mental health. My family history includes a great deal of mental health issues. My family history includes a great deal of addiction. I lost my mother and my father when I was 13 years old due to cancer. So there's a part of me that just wants to get in front of doctors and go, you've received a great deal of resources. The most precious is time. Where are we? Okay. So, humanity's existential crisis is insufficient animal source food. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and we can talk about them, and we should talk about them, but this needs to be the goal. Not some other, existential is it's over. I'll use it here. Okay, ruminants. Our story as a species I described as from scavenger to predator to steward. And our story bends back to the grass. And just as an aside, as we think about grasslands, if you've spent any time here or on any of the continents where there are these vast biomes, where's the carbohydrate coming from? The really cool thing is that grasses came first, then the ruminants, then us, and there's tens of millions of years in between. Okay? Now, in a human's diet, we have 3 macronutrients, yes? Come on. Yes? Okay, good. And which of those are essential? I see 2, I agree, and it's protein. Actually, it's essential amino acids. And then it's carbohydrates, right? No, okay, it's fats. Okay? In a ruminant's diet, there is no such thing as an essential fatty acid. There is no such thing as an essential amino acid. And there are 2 forms of carbohydrates that are essential for proper rumen function. You have to have both structural and non-structural carbohydrates in order for the rumen to function properly. So you need cellulose, you need starch or sugar. Kind of like there's an evolutionary fit here. So, true health food comes from ruminants. We're not used to talking about it that way, right? Because we have the health food industry with all the smoothies and the juices and the organic vegan sugar. It's important to understand that when we talk about food systems, you cannot replace food production with food processors. So if I take cereals, nuts, pulses, they're arguably human edible, right? If I then process them into some other substance that's edible, I haven't created anything new. I've just transformed it. And what we understand is in that processing of plant-sourced foods, we frequently reduce their nutritive value. And in addition, I'm not aware of any process that's 100% efficient. So we end up with less than we started with, because there's some waste in it, okay? So we end up with less food of lower value by doing that, as opposed to this wonder of creation called a ruminant, which is eating grass and giving us all sorts of services as well as products. Now, people will talk about food feed competition. And I think I got those reversed. Frequently it's feed food competition. Feed is what we give animals, food is what we give people. All right? Okay. So if I look at the global domesticated ruminant animal herd, 96% of all the feed that all the ruminants consume is not human edible. It's actually a little bit more because a lot of the cereals, that 4% that's towards the top there, between 11 and 12 o'clock, that's the cereals wedge. And a quarter of that, or 1% of total, is off grade, not suitable for human consumption, but we can still feed it to livestock. Okay? And lest anybody think that that's denying anybody of food, that's about 10% of global cereal production. I'd say that's a good investment. So there is no feed food competition, regardless of what people say. And again, we have this wonder that can take 43 pounds or 19.5 kilos of grass dry matter and convert it into 5.3 pounds or 2.4 kilos of milk solids per day. And that's minerals, vitamins, fats, protein, and carbohydrate. Out of a resource that we cannot utilize as food. Okay? There is no feed food competition. Now, anybody here remember Francis Moore Lappé? Diet for a Small Planet? Was anyone else's childhood scarred by that? Well, it was, whether you know it or not, because her book is cited as a reference in the Senate subcommittee report, the Dietary Goals. And one of her key messages was, look at how many pounds of feed it takes to make a pound of meat. Shouldn't we just eat the pounds of feed directly? Missing that little detail about whether it's edible or not. And if we look at what's edible or not, we see that milk is actually positive in terms of contribution, in terms of energy and protein. In other words, it returns more than was consumed as edible. Okay? And beef, which is the second line, is less energy, but the protein is above what's consumed. Okay? So beef in the U.S., under our systems, is a net protein contributor to our food system. Okay? So understand, there is no feed food competition, and in fact, they are contributing to the food system. Nature isn't abundant. Leave the romance. We have these terms, net primary production, think of that as global photosynthesis. And then we have another sort of sub out of that, which is called human appropriation of net protein production. That's agriculture. Okay, if we look at the edible human biomass of the agricultural, it's less than 15% of the biomass produced in agriculture is human edible. One study out of Europe said for every kilo of vegan food, 3 to 4 kilos of inedible biomass are produced. If you want a circular food system, there must be livestock. And there's lots of other reasons for having livestock, but just trying to throw out some points here. Okay. You may have heard people say, if we weren't using all that land for livestock, think of how much more human edible cereals or soy or whatever we could grow. Okay. Let's imagine that this is an international soccer field. Sorry, football. It's going to be culturally appropriate. Regardless of what the dimensions are listed here, it's an international. And then let's just at random pick a logo to put in the middle. So let's imagine that the oh my goodness, the area between the two touch lines and the goal lines represents the land surface of the world. Okay? All the land of the world. Rangeland would be 47%, agricultural would be 39%, arable would be 11%, the best land is 1%. Arable land is agricultural land, but not all agricultural land is arable. It's not suited for cultivation. If we try, we damage. And we have these sorts of issues that have been well known for, again, well over half a century. There are these issues of soil health. They all involve forages, call them cover crops, it's the same thing. They involve managing livestock in the cropping systems, which means in the U.S. reversing the specialization process that's been going on in our agricultural systems. The agricultural land, over a third is tropical, so over half of the agricultural land is in the subtropic or tropical regions. There's special challenges with those areas and those soils, and the temperate you see listed. Last week I was in Brazil looking at their integrated cropping livestock systems. More food from the same land, fewer inputs, and we're seeing benefits to the soil. Some of this is on stations and experiments that have been running for 30 or 40 years. We see comparable greenhouse gas emissions from animals in wildlife and livestock-dominated savannas. So why are we saying the livestock emissions are worse than the wildlife, right? And there's stories in there. But grasslands have to be grazed or burnt in order to remain healthy. There's this myth that livestock production is incompatible with sustainable development. We have 600 million people classified as farmers in the world. But 250 to 400 million of those are subsistence or near subsistence. This is poverty. These are the people that are most vulnerable. Okay, so if I take, back here, that's less than 7.5% of the global population is considered farmers. If I take out the subsistence level, now we're down to 2 to 4% of global population are farmers. And then there's some key things. You can see these. The vast majority are family farms. 2/3 to 3/4 of farmers lack reliable access to electricity. How are you going to look at marketing animal source foods if you don't have reliable electricity? 84% of farms worldwide are 2 hectare or less. 90%, a quarter to a third of farmers are still using draft animals. Where the animals, they're in Africa and Asia. Over half the cattle, 3/4 of the sheep, virtually all the goats. So anything they're talking about, they're aiming it at Africa and Asia. Are Africa and Asia participating in those conversations? Again, cultural imperialism. Again, almost a third world's cattle and buffalo are draft animals. And they're counted in the emissions total when they look at beef production. But they're not producing beef. Manure fertilizes 1/3 to 40% of global cropland to some degree. So if we get rid of that livestock, we need to replace the fertilizer. But right now, already over half of the nitrogen inputs for global cropping systems is provided by synthetic nitrogen fertilizer. And we have 2 billion human beings that are dependent on burning dirty biofuels like dung for their primary cooking fuel, which means increased rates of respiratory disease for women and children. Also means loss of fertility, okay. Sustainable food systems typically does not include factors that I would like to add dealing with metabolic illness, malnutrition. If we talk about sustainability, though, notice environmental, societal, economic. Too often the popular conversations devolve to only environmental and only emissions. So we have to look at all, and we have to look at them in depth, but what's the societal impact of malnutrition? Okay, 60 to 70% of humanity is malnourished. We know the disease burden. What's the economic cost? How about 6.2 trillion US dollars per annum? Oh, and there's an environmental impact. And this estimate suggests that 2 to 4% of global emissions are due to the healthcare industry treating malnutrition-related chronic illnesses. By the way, beef global is 6. So I would argue that the former is avoidable. Sustainable food systems require livestock. There's a difference between animal and plant-sourced foods. Energy is different, but we talk about it in terms of calories, right? Protein and minerals are different, but we talk about them in terms of mass. Vitamins requirement, we know that's dependent on the diet, and that's frequently not included in the conversations. Plant source versus animal source energy in the human diet. Our food supply is already plant-based, and maybe that's the effing problem. Varies across regions, and it varies within countries. We understand that. Here's something interesting. What colors did I use for the plant source versus the animal source? Right? Green and red, of course. Is that accurate? Well, let's take a look. No, it's not. Energy supply, wheat end products, rice end products, sugar, maize end products. Those are the top 4. Before I ever get to an animal source food, and that's milk. Ain't none of them green or red. And a similar thing for protein. Just want to point out that the way we just sort of implicitly think about things, we need to maybe re-examine just a little bit. My vision: where there is no vision, there is no hope. George Washington Carver. Remarkable human being. We ought to be about increasing human flourishing. But flourishing requires nourishing. And that means more than merely nutrients, but we understand that nutrients are essential. Okay. But as we heard, cognition requires nutrition. Imagine 10 billion human brains properly nourished, communicating with each other. What problems don't you think we can address? We can have healthy people and healthy soils thanks to ruminant animal agriculture. Can we do better? Of course. Must we do better? Yes. But it's essential. A few years ago, I was joined by a certain... Where is it? There it is. Gentleman on a paper given to an international rangeland congress promoting what I'm calling the Green Revolution. As we needed ruminant revolution. As we needed a green revolution to avert famine for 1 billion people when that was 1/4 of humanity, we need a ruminant revolution to provide a higher quality diet for the 60 to 70% of humanity that's currently malnourished. Scaling up current practices could increase meat production, but at the same time represent an offset of 1/4 of the EU population by merely using what we already know what to do. Again, saying the same thing. It wouldn't take much. It's a minor redirection of resources that are currently being allocated. So what can we do to further that conversation and affect this program? So let's build some bridges. We need fewer silos and more lighthouses. And I've been trying to do that. If you're not aware of the Dublin Declaration, this just happened the week before I got to Argentina. There are several editions of a journal that I recommend to people. There's an online white paper called Animal Source Foods and Ethical, Sustainable, and Healthy Diets. Recommend that to everyone. I have something to do with these things. Ag Next is Colorado State University. Clear Center is UC Davis. So I thank you for being here. I thank you for what you're doing to change and improve the world. And I thank you for those of you who have shared your information that I've benefited from and I've been able to just communicate to the people that I get to interact with. My social media accounts, I invite correspondence. Again, the QR code should open up a folder that has a PDF as well as all the slide images. Thank you for your patience. I know we're about to have some snacks. I'm here until they pull down the tent and tell us to get out. So thank you very much.